You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, today we have a guest on the podcast, Melda Sofuoğlu. Melda works in the telco industry. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term telco, which probably isn't very many, but just in case, telco is short for telecommunications, or in the old days, it was short for telephone company, basically. These days, that means cell phones and cellular networks and internet and stuff like that. I first worked with Melda about 8 or 9 years ago, something like that, when she lived in Istanbul and worked for a major telecommunications company. But for a while now, she's been in London with a different company. And in both cases, she was working with very well-known companies where most of our listeners are either subscribers or maybe have even worked for one of those companies at some point. And Melda also recently, just a few months ago, finished her PhD. And I wanted to congratulate you on that, Melda. That's a huge step and something. Yeah. So tell our listeners, what department did you get your PhD from and what was your dissertation on?
Thank you so much for the invitation, first of all. It's a great pleasure to be together in this podcast. So absolutely, I would be happy to share that, my PhD journey, I can say, because it's been a journey because I completed my PhD in 7 years. So it was a not short journey, but it's ended with a happy ending, I can say. So I earned my PhD from the Department of Business Administration in Istanbul. And my dissertation focused on exploring the intricate dynamics between the organizational culture, job satisfaction, and organizational commitment within virtual organizations, especially in the service sector, but domestically and internationally. So in my research, I conducted an extensive online survey involving 559 people, employees working in virtual organizational structures globally. And the core of my analysis revolved around understanding how these three elements, the organizational culture, job satisfaction, and organizational commitment, interact with one to another. So thank you.
Today, let's give our listeners a little free advice, just in case they don't want to hire me and get the more personalized service. So basically, we're going to dive into some of the main things that you've learned in our work together over the years. But before we get to that, tell our listeners, if they want to get in touch with you, where can they email you, or what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can find me through LinkedIn. So Melda Sofuoğlu. Just you can simply search and just we can get connected. They can find me through LinkedIn.
Okay. And on to today's topic. So over the years, what are some of the most useful tips that you've picked up in our work together? Or in other words, if someone is coming up through the ranks of the corporate world, what do you wish they would do with their presentations and communications that they aren't presently doing? Let's give these people some advice.
Yeah, for sure. So as you said, it's been a long time, a long journey altogether, and we learned throughout the journey, especially I learned a lot, I can say. So over the years, one of the most significant things I've learned through our work together is the immense boost in confidence I gained in my English skills, which allowed me to pursue my dream of moving to a new country after 21 years. When I secured a strategic and senior role in London, I faced the challenge of creating presentations for companies' executives about my project, something I wasn't accustomed to doing, especially in English and within a different cultural context, right? So that was my a bit like the journey I need to learn and work together. So the support from you and these sessions was invaluable in helping me prepare for these presentations. And
let's back up a second there. You mentioned the cultural context. What differences have you noticed as you've moved across the world and working for a global company? What differences have you noticed in terms of the cultural differences and how information is presented?
So yeah, I think it's a great question. In terms of the context, I can say it doesn't vary too much, but the cultural
Okay.
the context impacts a lot how you convey your message to the audience. For example,
Sure.
in Turkey, in my Turkish experience, we talk a lot. So when we go through a story or a subject, we start from scratch and etc. But for
Sure.
example, in my environment, I learned a bit more to be how to be succinct and straightforward to the
Uh,
topic and get what you need. So a bit more
okay.
like executive way, a summarize and concise way to convey your message is the something I can
Okay.
say really very like an very clearly difference between cultural context.
Alpar, I can see you nodding in vehement agreement here. So tell me what's on your mind.
Well, I have several questions on my mind. A couple of them not related to the podcast at all, but aroused my curiosity after Melda told about her PhD. So my first question is going to be outside the scope of the podcast, Melda, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Because just before coming to the recording today, I was looking on LinkedIn and a post came up about um, some job positions being ghosted by new starting employees within 48 hours or 72 hours. And you told me that you dug into the job satisfaction, although it was, if I understand correctly, in virtual organizations. I was wondering if you came across any information on why that is happening, or was it happening in the surveys that you did, or did you come up with any information which could answer this burning question on my mind as to why this is taking place?
Yeah, I think Alper, you spot on. So this is one of the four and most important, outcomes in my dissertation was so we treat companies as like a one global environment, which is true, but at the same time, it's the perceived from different demographics, especially the newcomers or a tenured people have
Hmm.
different expectations and perceptions for the culture. And what I realize, and we discuss in my company with the youth generation as well, I think the young people have really different, very differentiated expectations when they first join to a company. That's
Hmm.
why it's so crucial for us, for the leaders, for the companies, to design a cultural environment which fits for all, especially inclusive for the young generation who needs more support throughout the virtual organizational setups, working from home and etc. But they need more support, and their expectations are significantly different from the tenured people who used to work for the company for years,
Mm.
right? So this is one of the most highlighted topics I can say. And also what I can say, especially for the newcomers, we need to design a bit more supportive environment, especially in the virtual organizational setup, so that people sometimes newcomers feel lost. Well, what is the expectation from me? How I will do it? So they need a bit on-job training and learning
Hmm.
environment instead like tackling learning environment, and they miss it, and they sometimes got lost, and they really require we as the leaders support on this journey. So we are working, and it's one of the most significant difference I can say.
Hmm.
The generations and the tenure of the people in the company is really perceived in another way or different way, and we need to really find a balance. It's not like something else, it's perceived each and every of us in the same way.
Okay. Matt, I have a follow up on that.
Sure, go for it.
Melda, the last time I was employed was decades ago, and I think onboarding didn't exist back then. And if it did, it was like my boss having lunch with me and telling me his demands. That was like the onboarding process. I understand now, especially in very large organizations, there's an onboarding process for the newcomers, and sometimes they usually involve presentations, right? I wonder
Yeah.
how those situations go. Have you ever been through them? Have you ever witnessed what works or what doesn't work in terms of the way the current employer of the company communicates the vision and does the onboarding to the newcomers?
Yeah, we in my company, we this is one of the most important things. So the onboarding training process is really very crucial for us, and each and every newcomer has to go through to make sure we have an aligned vision at least. But this vision or the learning journey is not something else you can take to people and teach them in 1 week or 2 weeks. It's like a long-term process. And what I can highlight on the onboarding process or the learning is one of the most crucial part, but more importantly, the on-job training and throughout the adoption period, how you support those people. As you said, for example, it is not something else your manager is talking about the expectations or the demands. Someone should help the newcomers how to do it, how the dynamics or even the politics in the company works, so the organization structure, when you need to, who else you can get support from, or those kind of really seem small, but those small things makes your success, or just defines your outputs, right? So that's why it's so crucial, both onboarding and afterwards, so the support period. So for example, in my company, we have a great now structure called coaching sessions. Okay, so each and every new comers, especially from the young generation, we allocate a coach, but this coach is not a manager or in the same department. So this coach is from totally different departments and listen and just support those young generation how to find their ways throughout their experience in work life, and maybe the first experience in their life in the workplace. So I think I love those kind of concepts, not only the onboarding, but also those coaching, on-job training, throughout support, through the adaptation, I can say.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Apar,
You're
I've got a
welcome.
question. Do you mind if I jump in here?
Sure.
Okay. Melda, you do a lot of work from home and helping people with remote work and departments working together remotely. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. This is my
Okay.
interest and professionalism, my area, I can say.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, in the old days, for example, a sales call, for example, a sales call, it was face to face, and that was kind of people's comfort zone, the face to face contact, and being able to reach across the table and shake a hand and stuff like that. And now, all of a sudden, for the past couple of years, people have been forced into this world where things are happening online, and sometimes they're kind of confused by that, and they're even a couple years later they're still trying to find their sea legs. So what suggestions would you have for these people about how to present information online, how to make connections online, stuff like that?
So I have two answers for this question. One
Sure.
is especially to give an example of this sales conversation. I can say never work from home or these virtual solutions will
Okay.
shift the human touch importance and the power of the human touch. So
Okay.
for example, those kind of sales activities, or kind of, for example, I even
Mm-hmm.
prefer, if it is a really important meeting and if I want to convey my message, which is so important, I need to do it, I prefer to be in person. Okay,
Sure.
that's
Sure.
why this virtual organization setup never will be the replicative of the
Okay.
human touch and the beauty of the strongly the attachment of human never replaced in that way.
Sure.
But what the second my answer is, so but working from home or the virtual organization setup is a great benefit for the employees.
Okay.
So the employers should think about to give the flexibility, like a mindset for an employee,
Mm-hmm.
whenever they need to, they can go come to the office, but whenever they have some from behind the desk activities, why I need to go to the office, right? So it is a great, I think, benefit for the employees to feel more flexed rather than like do you have to go to a very certain pattern like 9 to 5. So
Sure.
that's why I think so that I leverage this work from home or virtual organization setup. I prefer this should be a great benefit for the employees. And
Okay.
I highly believe, a big believer of this also creates a mutual trust between the employee and the employers
Okay.
together. So
Sure.
they trust each other, and so they give the um, autonomy and empowerment for the employee, so they decide where to go. Of course, there are some common also like agreements. For example, in some days, for example, in my company, we go to office minimum 2 days, 2 to 3 days, and we
Hmm.
have team days where I know in certain day all my colleagues will come together, and I know when I go to the office, my colleagues will be around, and we will have lunch, we will chat, or do the teamwork together, and so on and so forth. But I know
Sure.
this is a totally flexible. Apart from this one team day, I can pick and choose out of those, the 4 days,
Hmm.
which day is best fit for my preference, my agenda, to go to the office, right? So that's why
Sure.
it's really important. So the idea is not to push everything else like work from home,
Hmm.
but give a bit more
Okay.
empowerment to the employees, and give them a bit, because the work life is a long journey, right? So and also we are the resources, and we need to use our resources in the best way, in the best effective way. And this work from home setups, or this hybrid working models, is a great, I think, asset for a
Hmm.
long term and happy employee setup. Is a great tool we can use in a great way.
Okay. And Alper, I've got another question in mind, but I don't want to hog all the questions because we're running out of time
I
here.
also have, but go ahead. I'll ask
Yeah.
after you.
Okay. Okay. So, Melda, so it sounds like we're running out of time, but I have one question and Alper has a question, and then we'll let you go. So I'm just wondering, Melda, you've worked in multiple countries, and here on the podcast and in the presentation world in general, we hammer on the idea over and over that slides should have less information. Slides should have less information. Don't overwhelm your audience with information. In your perspective, is this a universal thing, or is it like, does it apply more to some countries than to others?
Yeah, so I can definitely say it's a universal thing, especially when you go through a bit more executive levels.
Mm-hmm.
It's super important, one of the most important things. So the how you transfer your message in a
Okay.
most concise way, succinct way. So it is a universal, I think, um, 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 like a tip. I can say.
Mm-hmm.
Moreover, I think we mentioned around the how to prepare the presentations. I always a
Sure.
big believer of the less is more. So the
Mm-hmm.
less messages or the virtuals you put in the preparation or your presentation, and then you give
Sure.
the backwards, so the convey your messages verbally. It's the
Mm-hmm.
most powerful way, I can say, rather than loading lots of words and
Yeah.
sentences in a slide. This
Okay.
is one of the most, and also it makes a bit more flexible, so that you
Uh-huh.
just put into your slide a simple one message, but at the
Okay.
background you are flexible. You can say, you can tell, you can customize what else, or
Sure.
how you want to convey your message. It's so important in each and every culture, I can say, and I use a lot, and I'm investing in how to be more concise and
Ah,
succinct with my messages, but it's
sure.
really important in general across all the cultures.
Good point. Good point. And so, Alper, do you want to bring it home with the last question here?
Well, those responses answer 99% of what I was going to ask about, like some best practices in online presentations, but I think they go hand in hand for all the presentations. So I'm going to switch to my backup question, which is again outside the scope of this podcast. How are you holding up with London weather?
So it's a great sunny weather so far. So yeah, one of my really very close friends was talking about, Melda, when you decide to move to London, you have to choose to be happy rather than following up when the weather will be sunny, right? And then I'm pursuing still like this advice. So I prefer to be happy. So that's why I stop following up the forecast and etc. It's always
Good point.
unpredictable.
Good point.
I can say, but I love sun and sunshine, of course, but it is not, do not depress me too much. Of course, if it rained like for a 1 week and you never, able to, even go outside, it's not the ideal scenario. But I'm not a person like depressing a lot without sun. Of course, it's always preferable. And also, I have a great country in holidays, in summer I can go. So that's why it's not that much a depressing problem for me, I can say.
Okay, that's great.
I think that was a hilarious comment. In London, you have to choose to be happy.
Yeah. You do not get both. You get one of them. So pick happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Alper, anything else, or shall we wrap it up here?
Yeah, we can wrap it up.
Okay. So thank you very much, Melda, and Alper. So I will see you next week then.
Yeah. Thank you, Melda. It was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here, and good luck with all your podcasts. And I'm a big fan of the podcasts you create. So
thank you.
Go for it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The pleasure is two-way. It was great to have you on here today. Thank you very much, Melda. And so Alper, I will see you next week.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rosanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.